What if I told you Margaret Thatcher wasn't toppled by the poll tax, but that she was sacrificed deliberately? I'm Rachel, I'm a public and social policy consultant, and I'm on a mission to scrap council tax. So many of us will know the story of the poll tax and the riots and the resignation of Margaret Thatcher that came with it. It's been studied, it's been written about, it's part of our sort of national memory or national consciousness now when it comes to political dynasties, Thatcher in particular, Tories, the 80s, 90s kind of turbulent times that we had with capitalist, neoliberalist sort of ways of thinking. But when it comes to Thatcher and when it comes to the poll tax, that's usually kind of where the story ends. Like we go, "Whew, thank goodness we got rid of that." But what if poll tax and the collapse of Thatcher wasn't the end, and it actually was a whole political bait and switch, and that Thatcher was sacrificed so that council tax could live? What if they knew poll tax would explode, but what if they needed that explosion in order to sell the compromise? And what if council tax was the plan all along? So, extremely brief history lesson. In the late 1980s, we see Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, in her third term in office as Britain's Prime Minister, and we see sort of like an extension or a peak of Thatcherism, which involved a lot of centralisation, a lot of privatisation, and a lot of rate capping rows with local councils. Thatcher really wasn't a great fan of local government and wanted to use big sort of market mechanisms like taxation in order to discipline local authorities. And along comes a community charge, which we now know as the poll tax. So poll tax as an idea, as a theory, came out of the Treasury and the Adam Smith Institute as a series of recommendations and papers around a flat tax per person in order to fund local services, locally delivered services through local government. The ideological goal here was that everybody pays something. It's kind of peak individualism, and it's insidious, and it's absolutely lasted and embedded itself in our national consciousness, because if you look at the comments on a lot of the videos that I make around council tax, so many of them are, why should I pay for someone else? It was first implemented in Scotland in 1989 and it did not go down well. So it could not possibly have been a surprise in 1990 when people in England started to riot against it and the poll tax became more unpopular than ever. Why was it unpopular? Because a flat rate per person is the most regressive tax that there is. It means that people are disproportionately disadvantaged with higher bills the lower down the income spectrum they fall. But the results were a Tory revolt, riots in the street, and Margaret Thatcher's resignation. But that's the textbook story. That's where the kind of the biography ends, if you will. Kind of doing the don't. So then in came John Major and he fixed the whole problem with council tax. And whew, thank goodness we don't have poll tax anymore. Poll tax was given to us as an inevitable failure so that council tax would look more reasonable. So the bait was a radical system of a flat rate tax that made local taxation very visible, very personal. I'd also say like the maths was a bit too easy to work out. It was really easy to see how the system was as unfair as it was. Then comes the switch, enter council tax. Property-based, more progressive looking, though not progressive at all. It was still a system of localised revenue with centralised caps. Poll tax died so council tax could live. This is the hill I will die on. So bringing it back to Thatcher, her kind of political death becomes an ideological victory. Thatcher lost her office and she had to resign, but her principles were untouched. The experiment was allowed to continue through council tax. A red herring, a bait and switch, whatever mechanism you want to call it, it was never meant to survive. It was never meant to be the tax that we had. It was always meant to be the really terrible thing that made the next thing look reasonable. So what we've got today is a tax that is frozen in 1991 that punishes poor people. We've got debt collection, bailiffs, debt, distrust, complete lack of trust in faith in local government, blame avoidance from central government so that local councils are blamed for central, national, global economic forces that they simply cannot fight at a local level by collecting council tax from, 100,000 people at a time. It doesn't work that way. It was never designed to work well. It was designed to dismantle the welfare state and the public infrastructure that we have so slowly and so insidiously that we wouldn't notice it was happening. Poll tax was delivered to us on a plate to make it look like a really shitty system so that council tax would look more reasonable and that we would accept it, and we have. We now have people defending council tax like it's the only possible logical way that we can fund these services. If that's not ideological success, I don't know what is. I'm not saying Thatcher sacrificed herself on purpose, that she fell on her sword knowingly for the cause. I don't think she did. But as bad of a person she wasn't stupid. And I think probably, we'll never know, but with hindsight, perhaps, the compromise actually achieved what she wanted it to achieve. Local accountability, market and capitalist values in public services, the dismantling and slow demise of the welfare state and local government, a way to centralise and cap grants and revenue to local government whilst embedding this psychology of capitalism in everything that we do. This is not a complete history of what happened to Thatcher or to the poll tax or council tax indeed. But what I want to get across here is that we've been convinced by this bait and switch that council tax is the only reasonable, logical system that we have, because the alternative was so unworkable that council tax seems reasonable. It's not. It's fucking not. It's horrible. It's the worst. It's the worst, most destructive policy that we have. It's responsible for the degradation of public services, the stripping and sort of sucking out the life of the welfare state. So the Tories sacrificed Thatcher to save themselves. Thatcher was sacrificed so that the project could continue and that we would all accept the compromise. But here's the thing about neoliberalists and capitalists and fascists: they play the long game. They're willing to lose the battle in order to win the war. They're willing to put forward dreadful, easily understandable, unworkable policies like poll tax so that the system can survive, so that the ideology survives, so that council tax could survive. So Thatcher wasn't toppled by poll tax by mistake. It wasn't a political blunder. It wasn't the error that we make it out to be. It was part of this path dependency of neoliberalism that we're now absolutely entrenched in. Council tax is the worst. Council tax has got to go. We need better policy.